The night had fallen cold over the small town of Willow Creek, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and made the world feel lonelier than it really was. Street lamps flickered on and off, casting weak circles of light on cracked sidewalks. In one of those circles stood a young woman, her clothes torn, her feet bare against the biting gravel. Her name was Claire. She had no money, no family, and no shoes. Everything she once called her own had slipped away piece by piece, first her parents in a car accident, then her younger brother to illness, and finally, the last remnants of stability when her landlord evicted her for falling behind on rent. All she carried now was a canvas bag that held nothing but an old journal and a faded photograph of her family. She sat on the curb, hugging her knees, trying to keep warm. Passers-by hurried past her, some stealing pitying glances, others pretending not to see her at all. That was the hardest part, being invisible. But then came the sound of boots. Heavy, steady, and unhurried. Claire lifted her head. Out of the dim light emerged a tall man in a weathered cowboy hat, his broad shoulders casting long shadows behind him. He carried himself with the quiet assurance of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His clothes were plain but well kept, and the boots on his feet looked like they had traveled 1,000 dusty miles. He stopped right in front of her. "You all right, miss?" His voice was deep, calm, carrying a warmth that cut through the cold air. Claire hesitated. Strangers always came with risks. But something about his tone felt different. It wasn't laced with judgment or pity. Just genuine concern. "I'm fine," she muttered, even though she clearly wasn't. Her lips trembled from the chill. The cowboy crouched down so that his eyes met hers. They were a striking shade of blue, filled with sincerity. "Doesn't look like it. You don't even have shoes on your feet." Her cheeks burned. She pulled her knees closer, wishing she could disappear. I lost everything," she admitted softly. "I don't need your pity." He studied her quietly for a moment before responding. Not offering pity. Offering help. Those words startled her. Help wasn't something she was used to anymore. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't even know me." The cowboy straightened up and tipped his hat. "Name's Luke. And sometimes you don't need to know someone's story to know they deserve a second chance." For the first time in weeks, Claire felt her guard crack just a little. Luke held out a hand. "Come on. There's a diner just down the road. Warm food, hot coffee. You look like you could use both." Her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Still, she hesitated. She had learned the hard way that kindness often came with hidden strings. As if reading her thoughts, Luke said gently, no strings attached. "You have my word." And something in his steady gaze made her believe him. She reached out, slowly placing her hand in his. His palm was rough, calloused from years of ranch work, but the grip was firm and reassuring. They walked together under the flickering street lamps until they reached the diner, a small place with neon signs buzzing faintly in the window. The warmth hit her as soon as they stepped inside, and the scent of coffee and fried food nearly brought tears to her eyes. Luke guided her to a booth in the corner and signaled to the waitress. "Get her whatever she wants," he said simply. Claire hesitated to open the menu. "I don't want to take advantage." Luke shook his head. "You're not taking advantage. You're surviving. There's a difference." The word struck deep. For so long, she had felt like a burden, unwanted, forgotten. But here was a man who looked at her and didn't see weakness, just someone who deserved to be cared for. She ordered the simplest thing she could, eggs, toast, and coffee. But when the plate arrived, steaming and golden, she couldn't hold back. She ate like someone starved for more than just food. And all the while, Luke sat across from her, not saying much, just letting her take what she needed without making her feel guilty for it. When she finally slowed down, she noticed him watching her, not with pity, but with quiet admiration. "You remind me of someone," Luke said softly. "Who?" "My sister. She used to think she had to carry the world on her shoulders. Never asked for help. Broke herself in half before she realized it's okay to lean on others sometimes." He paused, his eyes distant for a moment. "Lost her a few years back. Illness took her." Claire's heart ached. She saw the pain flicker in his expression and realized this man carried his own scars. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "That's life sometimes. But it taught me something important. You don't walk away when you see someone struggling. You step in. Even if it's just with a hot meal or a pair of shoes." At the mention of shoes, Claire glanced down at her bare feet, embarrassed again. Luke noticed. Without another word, he stood up, walked to the counter, and disappeared into the back. When he returned, he was carrying a small box. He set it on the table and slid it toward her. Inside was a brand new pair of sturdy boots. Claire's eyes widened. "Luke, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," he interrupted firmly but kindly. "You need them." "I don't want thanks. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Promise me that when you're back on your feet, you'll do the same for someone else." Tears blurred her vision. For weeks, she had been invisible, discarded, forgotten by the world. And here was this stranger, a wealthy cowboy with no reason to care, reminding her she was still human, still worthy of kindness. She slid the boots on, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel broken. She felt grounded. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Luke leaned back, his expression gentle but unwavering. "Because, Claire," he said, "you have me now." And in that moment, she realized this night would change everything. The following morning, Claire woke in a warm bed for the first time in weeks. Luke had insisted she take the spare guest room at his ranch outside of town. She had resisted at first, fearing she'd be an inconvenience, but he reassured her the way he did everything, steady, calm, and without pressure. When she opened her eyes, sunlight spilled through white curtains. For a long moment, she just lay there, trying to remember when life had last felt this safe. The boots sat neatly by the bed, the symbol of a man's kindness that already felt like an anchor in the storm of her life. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted down the hall, pulling her out of bed. She followed the aroma into the kitchen, where Luke stood by the stove, frying eggs with the ease of someone used to early mornings. "Morning," he said with a small smile. She returned the smile shyly. "Morning. Sit. Eat. Ranch work waits for no one." She laughed softly, unsure if he was joking. But soon she realized he wasn't. After breakfast, he handed her an old flannel shirt, a wide-brimmed hat, and a pair of gloves. "You don't have to," she said nervously, holding the items in her hands. "I know," he replied, "but you'll feel better when you do. Work keeps the mind from wandering too far into the dark." And he was right. The day unfolded under the wide Texas sky, endless and blue. Claire followed Luke as he tended to horses, mended fences, and carried feed. She stumbled at first, her body weak from weeks of neglect, but Luke never grew impatient. He guided her, corrected her gently, and celebrated even the smallest of her successes. By midday, sweat ran down her temples, but for the first time in so long, she felt useful again. Needed. As the sun dipped low, painting the fields in gold, Luke leaned against a fence post, watching her with a thoughtful expression. "You did good today," he said. Claire brushed a strand of hair from her face, her chest rising and falling with tired breaths. "I forgot what it felt like to belong somewhere." Luke's gaze softened. "Well, you do now." His words lingered with her long after they returned to the house. That night, while Claire sat on the porch sipping tea, she finally shared her story. The words spilled out like a dam breaking, losing her family, the eviction, the long nights on cold streets. She expected him to judge her, maybe even pity her. But Luke just listened, his hands folded loosely, his eyes steady on her face. When she finished, silence hung between them. The crickets sang, and the stars began to appear one by one. "You've carried too much on your own," he said finally. "But carrying weight alone doesn't make you strong. Knowing when to let someone help, that's real strength." Her throat tightened. "What if I fail again? What if I lose everything again?" He leaned back in his chair, tipping his hat slightly. "Then you stand back up. And if you can't, well, then you've got me to help you up." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't only from sorrow. They were from relief. Weeks passed, and slowly, Claire found pieces of herself she thought were gone forever. She learned how to ride horses, how to mend tack, how to rise before dawn and work until the sun disappeared. With every day, she felt her spirit stitching itself back together. But the greatest change wasn't in her, it was in the way Luke treated her. He never saw her as broken or weak. He never reminded her of what she had lost. Instead, he reminded her constantly of what she could still become. One afternoon, while helping Luke load hay bales onto the truck, a man from town approached. He was a ranch hand from a neighboring property and, unlike Luke, his kindness didn't run deep. "Luke," the man greeted, his eyes shifting toward Claire. "Didn't know you'd taken in strays." Claire froze, shame flooding her veins. Old fears rose again, the feeling of being unwanted, out of place. But before she could slip away, Luke stepped forward. "She's no stray," he said firmly, his tone carrying a quiet authority that made the man shift uncomfortably. "She's part of this ranch now. And anyone who's got a problem with that has a problem with me." The man muttered something under his breath and left, but Claire stood rooted, stunned. Luke's words had been simple, but they wrapped around her like armor. For the first time in years, someone had defended her, not out of obligation, but because he truly meant it. She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Why do you care so much?" Luke looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Because once upon a time, I needed saving too. Someone gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. Now it's my turn to do the same." Claire's chest ached. His kindness wasn't charity, it was a cycle. A gift meant to be passed on. Months later, Claire stood at the same diner where she had first met Luke. Only now, she wasn't the one sitting on the curb with nothing. She wore the boots Luke had given her, the flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, her posture stronger, her eyes brighter. And in the corner booth sat a boy, no older than 16, trembling with hunger and fear. Claire saw herself in him instantly. She remembered the cold, the invisibility, the ache of being forgotten. She walked over, slid into the booth across from him, and said gently, "Hey, you look like you could use a hot meal." The boy looked up, startled. "Why are you helping me?" She smiled softly, her heart swelling with a truth she had learned from Luke. "Because you have me now." The boy's eyes filled with hope. And Claire realized in that moment that Luke had given her more than food, more than shelter, more than boots. He had given her the power to be someone else's light. And that was wealth greater than anything money could buy.